So are we on?
We are on.
We're on. We're on, everyone. The theme music played evidently, which we can't hear in studio, or at least not today. We don't have a producer. We don't have a pastor. This is questions you never thought you could ask in church. So you are in the right place if that's what you're tuning into. So today it's going to be interesting, Andrew. Here comes Andrew. You'll see him walking in right now. If you're online with us on Facebook, 216 the Net Facebook page or Fellowship of Faith Facebook page. That's a tongue twister. Anyway, our pastor, David Gadini, is laid up and ordered bed rest, right?
I think so, yeah.
So evidently he's got to be on some steroids. He hurt his back again. And what is it? What is it? A muscle? Is it a...
I don't know that they know necessarily. So lots of rest and hopefully recovering soon here.
But he did promise us that he would be there on Sunday. So what condition he's going to be in, I don't know.
We'll find out.
We'll see if he's on some good drugs. So that's all. It's going to be funny as well. So anyway, nope, Dave, hopefully you're doing well. We're praying for you. And if everybody out there can pray for a healing, that would be great too. And it looks like I don't know what just happened. We've got some interesting things.
There we go.
I think we're going to try today because this was an idea that came about where we were like, what happens if... Well, I think even if Dave was here, we were going to try this to see maybe what it would be like if we used the questions that were sent in and we imported them into Chat GPT. And so then we thought, well, maybe they could have a little debate, AI versus pastor. Mm-hmm. Pastor's not here, so it's going to be very one-sided today.
So take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt.
Yeah, so last week we had some questions that came in, and we were also Randy, if you know Randy Bridgeford, who is also known as Sparkplug or Sparkplug Ministries. He's on his way over to, where's he going?
I think he's in Europe. He's going to be around Europe, yeah.
So anyway, we wish safe travels for him and that the ministry would do well there. But so this is going to be interesting, everyone. We have no idea what's going to happen, what questions are going to pop up, what answers are actually going to eventually pop out of ChatGPT 2. So we're not, we don't want to be held responsible for those.
I think so. I think that's a safe bet. Yeah.
So that's our disclaimer for the day.
Yeah. Before coming here, I was at home. I was messing around with it a little bit to see kind of what things it would get, and was just asking it like, what questions are people asking in church, to go, what does it think people are asking?
Yeah.
Or why people aren't going to church, or those types of things. So
yeah. And just before you got here, I typed in, well, what does it say about this actual podcast?
Oh.
And I don't think it got the question correct, or it didn't understand the question that I was trying to ask.
It couldn't tell which podcast you were talking about.
Well, I said, what is the podcast questions you never thought you could ask in church? And so this one actually is kind of interesting because it's more geared towards you.
Oh,
yeah.
So I say this is a podcast hosted by Andrew Metcalf. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's great.
And no one else needs to be on it.
It's the #1 podcast now over Joe Rogan. So congrats, Andrew.
We're making big strides.
So you want to get into it? You want to answer this question?
Sure. I mean,
well, no, I'll read it to you.
Yeah.
I'll read it to you.
Yeah.
So it says, one pod question I never thought I could ask in churches: how has the rise of social media and technology affected the way churches operate and communicate within their congregations? And a little follow-up to that, it says, this question delves into the intersection of traditional religious practices with the modern digital age. It raises interesting points about the church's use of social media to engage with their members, how they broadcast services and events online, which is kind of what we're doing right now, right?
Yeah.
And how they handle online criticism and feedback. It also explores the impact of technology on religious practices and whether it has brought people closer to their faith or pushed them further away.
This sounds like one of the questions we usually get in, because there are usually about 10 questions in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that. What was the very first? The rise of social media.
So how has the rise of social media and technology affected the way churches operate and communicate with their congregations?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely been a shift over definitely the last couple of years, but I feel like some churches have been, successfully navigating social media for probably the last 5, 8 years, 10 years. I don't know. When did Facebook come out? 15 years ago?
Gosh, I don't know. It's making me feel really old, though.
I know. Like, okay, 10 years ago, I graduated college, so there was definitely Facebook then.
Okay.
But I think, yeah, you had maybe just a few churches live streaming then. Mostly your congregation was whoever came into your building.
Mm-hmm.
And then definitely once COVID hit, I mean, Facebook servers were crashing every Sunday morning because so many churches were live streaming, which is a cool issue to have. They had no problems with any other things live streaming, but Sunday mornings, there were so many people using their platform that their servers couldn't handle it. Which I think says something cool that the churches were able to do that and committed to doing that. Because I helped out a couple churches where their congregation has, 50 people, but they still wanted to provide a service for their congregation.
Mm-hmm.
So the two people that were in charge of their live stream were both in their 70s, and they just figured it out. Okay, how do we hook up a computer to get this to work? How do we get a camera going? We want to be able to hear Pastor, what he's saying. Let's get slides in there. So I think it's really cool how God was able to use the body and the congregation to still keep up that communication and that level of just worship and connection with their congregation during that time. Yeah.
I know that for us, like at Fellowship of Faith, it was, COVID, during the 2020 hits, COVID hits, right? We got to FOF in 2019, just before COVID dropped. And so it was interesting because it's like, okay, we're here, but we don't have a congregation in house. So it's, from our point of view, it's very difficult because it's like we didn't, you moved to a different state because we both moved from Nebraska, from a different congregation. We moved here. We're embedded into this congregation where for probably, I think I got here, our first service was August maybe. And then you moved here, which was
like end of August, September,
somewhere around there. And so it's just like you're trying to navigate like, okay, who are these people? What do we have in common? What are they going to think of it? You have all these questions swirling around in your head. Like, wow, this is going to be interesting. But it was even more interesting because COVID hit. We couldn't gather together. And it really allowed, one, on the personal level, like you just started to see, like when we got here, people's faces, kind of getting to know some of them a little bit. And then all of a sudden, we don't see them for forever, right? And so then it was like, okay, so what do we do at this time? And for us, it allowed us to really kind of like build up our infrastructure, right? Like change some things within the building, as far as the online presence, as far as connectivity, but also do some like campaigns where we actually did some building projects within the building, which was awesome. But
and things that were very much looking towards the future of, okay, where do we see this congregation going? And then what are the steps that we'll need to take to get there? What are the downfalls? What are the pitfalls? What are going to be the difficulties? And that was really cool to be a part of that process because I didn't start full time until the summer of COVID. Right. So there was a little intermediate time where I was on staff and more hours, but I wasn't full time, so I wasn't coming to staff meetings and things like that. And that was really interesting. For those days? No, I didn't miss not having to be at all of the staff meetings. But it was very interesting to come onto staff and be more of a part of staff when there was no one in the building because I didn't know anyone at the church. So then all of a sudden, once we started doing in-person worship again,
that's true.
People have a good idea of who I am because either David talked about me in the service or they heard of me beforehand, before COVID. But then it's like, oh, now I have to meet people. Right. I don't know anyone, but they all know who I am.
But it was also even like super difficult too, because we all had masks on. So you only had half of the story as far as like the face goes. It's like, I think I remember those eyes, but I don't really. And did I have a good association with that set of eyes?
And did they have a Cubs logo on their mask or Cardinals or something like that?
And where were they at with the whole thought process, because it was, very divided as far as what people's thoughts and ideas as far as COVID, whether we should be doing this, whether we shouldn't be doing this. And that, so that even created some division there too. And so now look at where we're at in 2023. Like this is pretty cool because it's like we're full. We don't know where we're heading. We're getting into some exploration as far as like what could a current building look like that would suit the needs of our congregation, and how much growth are we going to anticipate, and all that stuff.
It's a good problem to have where you're like, okay, do we need to expand parking first? Do we need to expand worship center first? Do we need to expand children's ministry first? Like, because all of those different areas are
the chicken or the egg.
Yeah. And it's like, what's going to be the best and most effective and most, God pleasing direction to tackle first, so that everything else can kind of fall in line with that.
Yeah.
And I think one thing with social media too, looking at it now, kind of after COVID, people are back mostly worshiping in person, but now we have an entire kind of online congregation as well that is really strictly online, and they probably aren't ever going to come to our church building in McHenry, Illinois. But how do we facilitate relationship with them? How do we care for them as a ministry staff and minister to them, so they're not just, okay, I watched your service,
right,
but I feel a part of Fellowship of Faith. So I think that's something we're working on now, of what does it look like for maybe online membership, or how are they, starting a small group in their area around either our live stream service or using Right Now Media or something else like that, to where they can build a local community around them, but still be connected to the larger body of FOF here.
Right. Yeah. And that's tough, because if you I happen to do a little bit of looked at some of our analytics as far as Facebook goes, and kind of our population and where they're from. And we've got people all over the world.
Yeah.
But what was super interesting to me is that it was, you had McHenry was number one, that area, the geographic area.
Yeah.
Lincoln, Nebraska was number two, which was
interesting.
But at the same time, it's well, then I guess we have some work to do around here, because why isn't Woodstock? Why isn't Crystal Lake second, to that? And it'd just be super appreciative of all the Lincoln, Nebraska folks, still listening and wanting to be a part of it and whatnot. But
I wonder if it's McHenry County, which would include Woodstock and Crystal Lake.
No, because it had them broken down.
Oh, it did.
Yeah, which I thought was kind of cool. That it was that specific.
Come on, Woodstock people. We're both Woodstock people.
We're Woodstock residents.
That's because we're at church. We're not streaming at home. And I know that there's been some conversation, I think, at the church at large scale, of, is it the best option to be a member of an online church versus finding a local church in your community where you are? Because there is something to be said about going in person once, twice a week, 3 times a week for Bible studies or small groups, and you're really doing life connected with people. Whereas kind of right now, we have an hour and a half on Sunday mornings, and that's where our main connection is happening. But then what are you doing throughout the rest of the week to stay connected to the body, to stay connected to a Christian community? And is that the best option, or what God would prefer, or anything like that? And I think God is going to work in whatever way he's going to work, and grateful that he chooses to use us sometimes to make that happen. So but that's I think another part of that conversation of what is the good thing of this, or the bad sides of this. And I've heard the same too with social media in general, of we're hearing so many different reports and studies about the dangers of social media for teenagers, for young adolescents, for grade school kids even. And yet that's really our largest medium of communication as a church, is through social media and our e-news email chain. So are we, pushing people towards having to use some of these platforms that maybe aren't the healthiest for them? And what kind of resourcing can we provide so that it's a good use for your life instead of a negative use for your life? I don't know. I definitely find myself on Instagram, and all of a sudden I start watching reels, and then it's an hour and a half later, and you're like, wait, how did I get here?
Waste of time.
I started researching something for work, actually, and then ended up down this rabbit hole. I think a lot of people find themselves in that probably once a day, if not more, where you just end up in that social media rabbit hole. Thank God I don't have TikTok.
Yeah, I don't either.
I did for a week, and I was like, nope, go away.
I've never had it. And, you see TikTok videos on Facebook, and, it's, I guess, somewhat interesting sometimes, but I don't know. There's a lot of backstory there too. And there's the whole, well, now the U.S. government is trying to ban that. And, so it's well, do I really even want to delve into that? If they're not, if they don't want it, then why do I want it?
Why do I want it? Why do we want it?
Yeah.
And I've heard other not arguments, but other viewpoints of, well, people are already on those platforms, so why shouldn't the gospel message also be on those platforms?
Yeah, if you're using it for that, right?
Yeah, if you're using it for that reason.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of probably not so healthy interpretations of the gospel that tend to float around there.
That, and then who's, I mean, there's something that is like the algorithms, right? So it's like, so is your message of Christianity or Jesus even getting through, or are they suppressing any of that type of stuff because for whatever reason, so.
Yeah, I know that was one interesting thing with the, did you hear about the revival at Asbury College?
Yeah.
Asbury College.
Yeah.
I heard a podcast with someone who goes to school there, and they were so physically on campus for it, of some of the different videos that ended up trending on social media. And the stories were just completely wrong. Like, oh, this lady was like slain in the spirit and healed, because there's a video of her kind of, doing that thing of, oh, the devil's coming out of you, when in reality, and it had like 60 million views or something, when in reality, the lady actually had a seizure.
Yeah.
While they were praying, and ambulance came, got her, and took her away. And I think she was doing okay still, but you're like, okay, so can I trust what I'm seeing on social media? Because someone, who knows, they just shared it and thought, well, this person said that's what it was, so I guess we'll go with that. So how do you guard yourself against that and still stay skeptical enough, while still trying to stay true to what you believe?
So I guess moving on from that, if we're going to have chat GPT here, let us know what your questions are, what you would like to have answered.
Yeah.
Not just from us necessarily, but it would be interesting to see, like, what does chat GPT say about some of this stuff? And I know that you put in something earlier because you sent me a picture of it.
Yeah.
Just as far as like, so what was that? Like, did you type in?
Yeah. So I started by typing in a couple of the questions that we've gotten. And it was going pretty slowly. So I changed it up and was just like, what's the biggest thing keeping people out of churches? Because it didn't necessarily understand what questions do people have about this, but what's the biggest thing keeping people out of churches?
So is that like, that's what you asked?
That's what I asked it. Yeah. And it got cut off a little here, but it said there are several factors that can keep people out of the church. And they can vary depending on the individual and their experiences. But here's some common ones: a negative past experience. So some people may have had a negative experience in churches, such as feeling judged or excluded, and those experiences can make them hesitant to attend church in the future. Disagreement with church teachings. Some people may not agree with the teachings of a particular church or denomination, or they might have questions or doubts about it, and that causes them to then leave the church. And then busy schedules is what's at the very bottom of this. I think there were more, but they got cut off. So people tend to prioritize work, family, and other responsibilities, and may feel like they don't have enough time to attend church regularly. I would say those are probably the top,
spot on.
Some of the top three reasons. I think there's a lot of people that have negative experiences or relationships with churches, probably over the last 20, 25 years, probably as long as it's been going on. Because I think what's the saying, that the gospel is offensive, it offends people. Yeah. And whether or not it's the gospel, or also the church is run by people and people are sinful. If sometimes it's people that are causing those negative experiences.
Well, and like one of those was sports, right? Like sports activities.
Yeah.
So I know,
like, just your schedule. I don't have time Sunday morning to go to church.
So I know, like when my daughter was playing, Maya was playing volleyball, and it was like a club team or whatever. And of course, they would want to have games and stuff scheduled on Sundays, and we're like, that's not going to happen, So the question is, like, that's not a rarity. That's like a common thing. And so I guess my question would be, like, as we're, we mentioned in the past, like, okay, so we're looking at growing our campus, and should churches be a part of that? Meaning, like what would happen on our FOF campus if we had a gymnasium where they could actually have volleyball tournaments and games and stuff? Like, is that just giving into the culture, or is that like being part of the culture and then utilizing, like, hey, these people probably have never been to this campus before. Who knows what their church affiliation is, or even if they know Jesus, right? So would that be a win, or is that just like, you know?
Yeah, is that taking the place of a different select sport team or something like that? I know a couple people at our church, their kids are in, they call it Jesus basketball. So it's a basketball league for kids that happens at a church, and they do like a little devotional afterwards as well. So you're getting the word, but also having fun and learning how to play sports.
Yeah.
But yeah, it gets you in the building. And is that better or worse than a like YMCA league or this select team where you're practicing 7 days a week and have games on Sundays and everything? Yeah, I think even a lot of that has changed. One of our youth was telling us that they were starting marching band already for next year. This year. I'm like, what? Like, so when I was in marching band, we started in August for that school year. And that's what it was. Yeah. But they're going all summer and already starting this school year for next school year. I'm like, since when did that become
and why though? Like, do they have a all year
around
that
sport?
Year or something?
I don't think so. I don't know if they're just prepping for next year, but it's again, all of those extracurriculars seem to be just creeping more and more and more into your time. Where, okay, now you're doing games 6-7 days a week, practices twice a day. You're, even if it's your off season for your sport, you're still having weightlifting, or they're having you join this club team or this other, and it's like, when is enough? Like, are you going to get that much better for your middle school or high school basketball team by practicing all day, every day, all year round? Like, what is the value and the purpose behind that? To be the best? Okay, but then what are you sacrificing because of that?
Right.
And I'm thankful that when I was in sports and everything, you had your season and then it ended and it was done. And there was never anything on Sundays. There was maybe 2 tournaments a year on a Saturday, but everything was during the week after school. You could rely on it, and it didn't take over your life completely. I don't know how we got on that tangent, but
well, it was the sports, because like it was about a time, like people not having the time or not making the time to go to church because, well, they've got, other activities that are going on. So I guess the question is for like FOF, and as we kind of get into the idea of like, what do we want this campus to look like, and how can we have outreach on our campus? Yeah,
can we bring some of those other activities onto our
to
campus
us versus going out, and I think there's, it's wise to do both. But at the same time, it's like, well, I mean, if we can have people and they're utilizing, like, I would love to have a campus that is used 7 days a week, like that would make sense to be able to have, invest those monies into not just the activities, but hopefully the message that comes along with those activities, and be able to really get in people's lives and meet them where they're at versus, us having to, you create a lot of these like different ministries within the church, and it's a lot of energy and time and volunteers and people to manage those ministries and whatnot. And it's like, but to me, it would make maybe a little bit more sense. Like, well, what does it look like to have outdoor weddings at our facility? What does it look like to have a banquet hall at our facility? So that people are now utilizing our campus and like, well, I didn't even know this place was here. Well, this is cool. So anyway,
and you're providing a service to the community as well, because I've heard some of the astronomical prices that places are charging for. It's like, oh, well, it's $10,000 to rent our ballroom for the day for your wedding. Base. And then you have to use all of our food and all of our, so it's like, okay, if we can charge people $2,000, it's a great deal for them. We're at least covering our costs and getting people there. Don't quote me on those prices. I have no idea, but I'm guessing that's what I have. So we have no comments in the comment section, and it's making me worried that we're not actually streaming anywhere.
Well, it says that on live, it says
there's 8 people listening. If you're listening, say something in the comments so we know it's working. Or you can text questions anytime, 815-314-0363. We get those anonymously, and if we're not currently live on air, then we add them to our inbox list. That's looking pretty good, and I'm hoping typically in the summers we do a live questions you never thought you could ask in church, kind of couple weeks at FOF in person on a Sunday morning. And that's really cool to get, because it's congregation members that are sitting there or watching on the stream, texting right away. Dave's got an iPad, they're popping up, and he's answering them on the spot as it goes.
But this time
it's a little more immediate.
It is, but I would like to like replicate what happens here. So like create this environment
You
on
just
stage.
want to be able to talk.
Well, I do, because I
Yeah.
think people, get tired of Dave talking all the time. So.
He really does dominate the service. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Hey, Chris says hi. So we're
okay,
good.
perfect.
We're good.
Someone can hear us. That's good.
Well, yeah. So I think it would be cool, because that way people get to actually see. Because I don't know that a lot of people know like how the banter goes, sometimes, and I like to rib Dave a little bit, and
the last couple of weeks I've heard. I have had a couple different people come up to me at church and like, man, we love watching you guys on the podcast. It's just fun, and maybe you learn a little something along the way too.
And what I love about it is for us staff anyway, and for us three, as far as like a staff, I've been part of staffs where maybe things, with any ministry, you're always going to have people that you connect with and people that you just don't, right?
Yeah.
But it's encouraging for me as far as like the ministries that we're involved in with the worship side of things, that, it actually gives it like this to me is like a healthy time for us, because it allows us to get together and it forces us to connect, because like at FOF, we don't have church offices, so we're not there. And so a lot of us are working out of our homes, and so that time together.
Your only interaction is through email or once a week meeting or something.
So yeah, I enjoy this time, just if nothing else for that, to be able to be like, yeah, let's just talk about the things that are going on in life, and the questions that people are asking.
And we always have like impromptu meetings after this, it seems like.
Right.
Where we're probably supposed to be going back to church for a meeting there, and we'll end up hanging out here. And kind of starting before we even go there.
Yeah. Or we would go to
cool.
Bulldogs and have the margarita pizza there. So which is delicious. But you usually get some wrap that has eggs or shrimp in it or something.
Bang shrimp wrap.
Yeah.
It's the best one.
Debbie says she hears us. I am hearing you. Hey, Debbie.
Perfect.
And that is Sparkplug's wife.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Or mom. No.
Someone. They share the same last name.
There's the same last name. Yeah. So either one, we're praying for your son or husband. That's horrible.
Yeah, because he's going there with Sparkplug Ministries, which is I'm gonna butcher this, motorcycle ministry to the 1% club.
Yeah, which is super cool. Yeah.
And I know he's got plans to go. They're going all around Europe to different countries there and having some bike blessings and baptisms, and I don't know if they're doing some of the well projects as well.
Yeah.
But it sounds really cool. I think they're planning on making a documentary about it. So that was kind of part of it. But the whole process has been very much led by the Spirit. They're like, we don't know exactly where we're going. Yeah. We know the time that we're going and where we're supposed to be ending up. But then kind of from there, it's up to God and wherever he's going to lead them.
Yeah.
So.
Debbie says mama.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you for the clarification. We appreciate that. And what's even cooler too is like, so Randy and I have been friends for a little while now, and ever since he started coming to FOF and whatnot, but now we're friends on Facebook, which makes it legit, right?
Oh,
now it's solidified. So
now it's real.
But what's cool about it is that I just saw that he and his wife have now written a 30-day devotional book that's for sale on Amazon. Cool. Which was kind of cool. I didn't even know that about them, that they were actually doing this whole project. So I think maybe we'll have him on when he returns and he can promote it and talk about it and like what's the reasoning behind it and why did you decide to do this and how was the whole process. So anyway, yeah,
absolutely. I also asked ChatGPT before I came, what are questions people have about Christianity? And it gave me a list of 10 questions. Which I don't know. They mostly seem fairly standard. Who is Jesus? What is his significance to Christianity? What is the Trinity and how does it relate to Christianity? What is the Bible? What is salvation and how does one attain it? What's the difference between different denominations? How does Christianity view other religions and belief systems? How does Christianity address social issues such as poverty, racism, and injustice? What is the role of prayer and worship in Christianity? How does Christianity view the concept of sin and forgiveness? And what's the purpose and meaning of life according to Christianity?
Yeah,
that seems pretty comprehensive.
It does, and it brought up a point that like I would love to have a show, and I think we'll wait till Dave gets back here and maybe have a couple other people on. But with the whole diversity, equity, inclusion piece, that's a big part of our academia right now with
Yeah.
a lot of corporations, and now they're hiring a lot of staff for this as well. And so I guess my question has always been, because I understand it to a point, but at the same time, the reason this came up was because of some of the things that are happening at Concordia up in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of a big debate on whether or not that is needed there, because their thought process is that, and this is like at a super high level, so of course we would need to dig into this, but why would you need this type of thing in a Christian university or academia or learning, whatever it is, if you adhere to the gospel, right? That everybody's made in the image of God, and so therefore everything that is comes into that. So it would just be an interesting conversation to really dig into,
like extra steps or extra intentions or other things like that. Because what I immediately thought of, which is probably not a great correlation, but was all the laws in the Old Testament that the church added because, okay, well, we have these 10 commandments and the things that God told specifically, but then, well, in order to keep us from doing this, let's add this thing in there. And then in order to keep us from doing that, let's add another thing, another like layer of protection, another layer, another layer, until it's all weighed down by all these rules and you lose the message completely. So is that possible? This is okay, what's the end goal? And are we going to keep adding another rule, another person, another, qualification for this? And then we just keep going till all of a sudden, okay, what was the purpose of how we started this? And I think that's a lot throughout higher ed in general of a lot of colleges are dealing with that. If they've grown so much and now it goes, okay, what are we doing? What's the purpose here anymore?
I noticed something. I was just happened to be watching the news last night and they were talking.
It's a horrible choice.
It is because
choice.
If you ever want to just get depressed, turn on the news. But I would say probably as far as like, there's this whole certificate now that you can actually go to become a DEI officer, which it's $99. And there's a quiz at the end. And if you pass the quiz, well, you get a little certificate that says you're now a DEI officer and you can go work for a university in that capacity somehow. So, and the
$99.
I know, but see, the thing about it was like the salaries that these people were getting were like, wow, for instance, Stanford has an opening right now. So if you want to go work at Stanford, the base pay starting out was like 170 to 279 depending on your experience. And I just thought, wow, that's amazing. Like, it's a lot of money.
Yeah, you can get that with a $99
to go
$99 quiz.
So anyway, Dave Gadini says, rock on, Steve and Andrew. All right, don't know where you're calling from today, Dave, but glad to have you on the show.
Sound like a great listener. We're glad to have you. Glad to have you here.
Sounds like a good guy. I like the name.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So I just one of the questions
My bad. We don't need to know that.
One of the questions we have in our inbox that I don't know that Steve and I can necessarily provide a good answer for is why are there no Lutheran monasteries? But that seemed like the type of question that ChatGPT could give us an answer to. It's not so in depth in Levitical law and Greek or vague. So it says Lutheranism historically has not emphasized the practice of monasticism in the same way that some other Christian denominations such as Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy have. That it sounds like Pastor Dave talking.
It does.
It really does.
I think that's where he's over there with a laptop and he's acting like he's looking up scripture, but he's actually ChatGPT.
I think so.
We found your secret.
There's a little footnote here, powered by David Gadini. It's very interesting. During the Reformation, Martin Luther rejected the idea of monasticism as a means to achieving salvation, as he believed that it came through faith alone rather than through good works or religious practices. Luther taught that all believers are called to serve God in their daily lives rather than withdrawing from the world into a monastic community. As a result, Lutheranism doesn't have a tradition of monasticism, and there are very few Lutheran monasteries. However, some Lutheran communities have developed similar forms of communal living and service, such as the Bruderhof community, which emphasizes simple living and sharing resources in a communal setting. And then I think it told me I told it to stop because
we've had enough. Yeah,
but that makes a lot of sense that I didn't know that it was necessarily Martin Luther that came with that idea of, being a Christian means incorporating God into your daily life and how you're impacting people in your lives. So, withdrawing away just for the sake of religious practices or learning more about just your personal relationship with God at the expense of how can I impact other people and how can I spread the gospel.
Doesn't it seem a little selfish?
Yeah, I think I think so. And I know we talked about this a few weeks ago with some famous Christian author, writer, I believe. And he was a part of this monastic community, and he did set himself apart. And because of that, he was able to write all these incredible writings that we have. So there might be a benefit to that.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say it's a prescription for everyone.
Then maybe you do like
but is that like a sabbatical? Then?
That's exactly where I was just going to go.
Take a year and write this
right.
book.
Yeah.
And then, come back into your community. Again.
Right. Now, as a sabbatical, though, aren't you supposed to use that for rest?
I think some people do.
Okay.
Yeah. But I know some people also have like teaching sabbaticals or like learning sabbaticals where they're.
Yeah, depending on what type, right?
Yeah. I think I could take a year sabbatical.
Yeah, I could.
I don't know what I would do with it, but
Chris says and convents. So
yeah, I think the same thing. The idea of convents and monasteries in a similar way.
And Dave says, check out St. Augustine House in Oxford, Michigan. A couple in Sweden and Germany too. Okay, so he's saying that there is a monastery.
Yeah,
in Oxford, Michigan.
Augustine House.
I think that would be a good road trip for us.
Yeah. Go for it. That's a staff retreat.
Yeah. I want to. How long is? When's the check-in date? And how long do we stay in?
I'm trying to look through here, see what other ones we can plug in here. Ooh, let's see if it knows any Greek.
Dave also says, I think the camp world has in many ways become the new alternative, meaning camp, like going camping.
Camping, probably. Or you're connecting with nature, you're outside of your distractions in daily life and that type of thing, and you're kind of drawing away.
Yeah, it seems like he just can't get away from the show. So I'm thinking that we actually send a camera crew to his bedroom.
Oh, to his house.
And he could just chime in.
I think that would be awesome.
Are you dressed, Dave? Anyway. Okay,
it's typing out an answer now. The question I put in Revelation, how do you view the Greek word ezison? I think that's how you say it. Does it mean bodily resurrection or just spiritual resurrection into heaven? And as it's typing, that Greek word is used several times in the book of Revelation to describe those who have been raised to life or who are alive in Christ. The precise meaning depends on the context in which it's used, but it generally carries the sense of being brought to life again or living anew. So it seems to be more of I wouldn't necessarily say bodily resurrection unless that's the context that it's used in, but it seems like it's more of that spiritual resurrection, being alive in Christ, being born again, turning your life around, that type of thing. It looks like it's used in Revelation 20, verse 4 and 5. So maybe check that out if you're curious.
Yeah. Can you type in and maybe Dave can comment on this since he's on too, but type in what is the restoration movement? This was brought to my attention
like within Christianity.
Yeah. It's actually, I think, a denomination now that is the
ooh, that one, it got quick.
Yeah.
Didn't have to do any work.
Yeah. So I did a little research into it as well. And there's some interesting stuff there. But basically, one of the things that in there, of course, they have a conservative and more liberal or I can't say denominations, but sects of the restoration movement and the churches that came out of that. But they're mostly all non-denoms.
Okay.
So they didn't want to be a part of a denomination because they thought that and the creeds were actually
limiting.
Well, not limiting, they were divisive. And so with that, I just I'd never heard of that until someone mentioned it to me as far as the restoration movement, and because I thought maybe they were talking about the Reformation or something like that, but I'd never heard of the restoration movement. So I think it was Campbell was.
Yeah, it says it's also known as the Stone Campbell movement, 19th century movement within Christianity that sought to restore the practices and beliefs of the early Christian church. It began in the United States and with the desire to promote Christian unity, the rejection of creeds and other human traditions, and a belief in the need for personal conversion and spiritual renewal.
Right.
So kind of that idea of, I mean, it seems like throwing off the power structures, if you will, of the churches, or the limitations of the churches, and how do we get back to that Acts 2 community of you're doing life with each other, you're relying on each other for things, you're providing and they have everything in common, those types of things.
It seemed to me like they were focused. I don't even know that they really focus on the Old Testament. I think a lot of it is New Testament theology and
it says it sought to unify Christians under a common set of beliefs and practices that were based solely on the teachings of the Bible.
Yeah.
So they rejected denominationalism, sectarianism, and advocated for a return to the simplicity and purity of the early church.
Yeah.
So that idea of how do we strip away all the things that we add to Christianity, or that we add to the Bible. I think in our Galatians series at church, Dave was talking about the plus ones that we had,
the perversions,
where the Bible says this and we decide to add, but also this thing, or well, that really means this, rather than taking it at its word and what it says. I said they also use a cappella music in worship.
Yeah, so this was interesting to me because
was that the context that they were saying?
Well, it depends on which version you're adhering to or practicing. So the very conservative version of the Restoration movement was like, no, they did not allow any type of instruments in worship. Okay. Like that was a no-go.
Yeah.
So then some of them were like, well, but that's not cool, like we need something in there. So that was one. I think there was another thing with baptism possibly too. I know that they just do immersion because that was the way
that's what they did.
Right.
That's what we assume they did in the Bible. I don't know that there's ever any explicit
I don't know
direction to that.
It would just, I guess I just found it interesting because
if it was in a river, that's probably how it was happening.
Sure.
You didn't have a font that you were splashing. Well, they went to the river, they got the water, and then they splashed it.
Yeah, because I think part of either, I don't know if it was the conservative or liberal, but probably the conservative arm of it. But they were saying that baptism was an actual requirement for salvation, and versus, or that it was. They get into works, work-based salvation as well, and like that was a piece of it. You had to do that in order to be saved. Now I could be completely wrong on that too. So I'm trying to recollect what my reading was, and I don't know if I'm doing a good job at it. So we can get into more of that if anybody's interested as far as the Restoration movement. Because had you ever heard of it before?
No.
Yeah.
No. Once I started reading, I'm like, oh, I understand the ideas of this. And that seems to be where a lot of the non-denominational churches came out of. That's why I wouldn't say reject some of those creeds and other more unifying things, but those are seemingly more unifying to the people who believe them and to the people who trust that I would say they would probably say the quote unquote humans who came up with these things. Versus, well, let's go to the Bible and what does the Bible say? Well, even though all those things are based on the Bible, and they were able to agree, that was what the largest church body could agree on, that the Bible says all these things,
right?
But now, it's not the Bible exactly, I guess.
Could you also say then, because one of my thoughts was, so the reason they weren't doing this, or one of the reasons anyway, was because they felt that it was divisive, right? So on the other side of that, could you also say, but it's divisive not to, right? I mean, that is in the sense of being divisive by saying, well, we're not doing this because we believe it's divisive. So it's like, well, now you're dividing yourself.
So y'all need to stop doing that. Otherwise, we can't have anything to do with you. Okay. That is very interesting.
Yeah. I
think the idea of a cappella music, I think, is interesting. And I extend that even into like technology as well. Because I think that's always something that I've wrestled with, because it's not a necessity for worship. You don't have to have slides. You don't have to have videos. You don't have to have the words on the screens. You don't need lighting. You don't necessarily need a sound system. But to a certain point, those are more helpful in communicating the message.
Well,
And I always view technology as ways to support the gospel rather than to overpower or over promote it.
yeah.
But it's helping to, I think, sustain that a little bit more.
So Maya had a choir concert on Monday, and what they did is they brought in the middle school and the elementary school kids that were in that district. So they were all at Woodstock Senior High School, and they had them sectioned out into, their groups and whatnot. And so at the end, they did this song all together, and it was really cool because, you heard 550 voices of different ages and maturity levels, together as one. And it's beautiful. It really is. It really is nice. And so, I don't have an issue with churches that would only want to do that. That's fine. But at the same time, if that's what you're looking for and you have an issue with, kind of the way that we do it, well, there's many churches around. Find one, so.
Yeah. Then you're turning your non-mandate into a mandate.
Right.
Oh, well, we have to do it this way because that's how they did it here.
Mm-hmm.
Now all of a sudden you're becoming the limitation that you didn't want to be.
Right.
Just like the same way of you're becoming divisive because you don't want to be divisive. So I think any of those things are dangerous. Once you say that it has to be this way, it has to be contemporary, it has to be Christian or traditional, it has to be a cappella, it has to be only guitar, it has to be only drums. Whenever you add on all those qualifiers, that's I think when the issues happen, because it's that is that adding those plus ones. And I always understand when people say oh, we don't have to have lights in worship, it's not necessary. It's not necessary, but is it effective in helping to communicate?
Yeah.
And I think once it goes beyond that, there's absolutely a line where now maybe this is a little bit too much. So at Christmas, the floating drummers, they had snare drummers on wires coming down into the church.
I saw that. Now, but you could say okay, well, is that too much? I don't know. I mean, I guess that's up to your own personal opinion.
Yeah, and an interesting story with that. One of the church tech Facebook groups that I'm on, there's a couple guys that are at that church or they help produce that Christmas show. And that's what it is. It's a Christmas show that they put on, which a lot of the bigger churches in Texas area, California area, you have your worship services and your Christmas services, but then for a few weekends in December, you also have this Christmas extravaganza going on. And that's what this was. It's something they sell tickets for. So all the money from the tickets goes into the production of that show. And then I believe they either donated the rest or it was going into the church's ministry. So it's a little, because they're oh, it's such a waste of money. Why is this necessary for worship? And it's not necessary for worship. We're putting on a theatrical show and the money is being paid specifically for this. Yeah. Kind of the same debate we were having with the, what was that? The Super Bowl movement, the commercials.
He gets us.
Oh, they used all this money for that. Yeah. And well, the money was given for that purpose.
Right.
So if people were going to give to that purpose anyway, then they should use it for that purpose.
Well, and I mean,
is it wasteful? Maybe, but is it getting people into your church building that wouldn't have ever been there before?
Right.
Is it getting people to have conversations about Jesus? Okay, well then maybe, yeah.
So
how do you put a price on that, I guess?
Yeah.
Which seems slimy to say, but
the show really reminds me of so back in the day, Barbie and I used to take about 50 senior citizens to Branson every year, right? We load up on the bus. And, there's different shows that you go around, which are going to be in different genres of music. And that was fun. But the main one that we would go to was the Sight and Sound Theater. And they would have a showing of Jonah, for instance. And I mean, the quality of in production was fantastic. And so it really did, depending on, if you didn't even know who Jesus was, well, you found out, right? So through that. But then at the same time, for me, already as a believer, the music was fantastic. The singing, it's a musical, so the music was really good. The atmosphere was really cool. The production value was really good. And to me, I could literally say it could be a time of worship for me, I am literally in it.
You were able to be immersed in it and you weren't distracted by, I couldn't hear this part or this was too loud or those types of things that's what I always say that at least my goal for tech is in churches It's to create distraction-free environments.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that means, we go to a certain level of tech and then we stop because that's too much, or that's why we use any technology, is to create that distraction-free environment. If Dave didn't have a mic to preach, okay, well, we probably couldn't have people sitting in the coffee house listening because they're 300 feet away from him.
Right.
They wouldn't be able to hear.
Right.
So that would be a distraction then, because they can't participate because they can't hear what's going on.
Well, let me just tell you, you're never going to succeed at that, Andrew.
Oh yeah, no, there's always going to be distractions.
Well, and not only that, but like what you see as a distraction, someone else may not see that as a distraction, or vice
it's
versa.
absolutely subjective to what you think and
which is
what
part
works
of the,
for you.
Which is part of the idea of, okay, so as a church, if you're going to make a hire, know what that person is about and how they view things and how they're going to do things, versus hiring someone and then saying, well, I knew what you wanted to do, but we want you to do this. Yeah. Well, then you just made the wrong hire, right? So I think churches need to be careful of that. Yeah,
if you have a specific direction you want to go, then find the staff to support that direction versus trying to
just fill a spot,
force people into that, or
do something they don't want to do.
Fill the spot. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really happy so far with the answers from Chat GPT.
So you mentioned to me on the phone, and man, time's flying still, even just us two.
I know.
It's 1:22. We have 8 minutes, and you said that there was a specific question. Christmas. Chris says we need a
Christmas extravaganza.
I thought that comment was hidden for a reason. Chris is probably the person that I know that loves Christmas the most out of anybody that I know, and I don't get it. I don't get it. I mean, I'm excited for her, and I'm glad that she does, but I don't know, Chris. Maybe, you know what I always like to say? If you're going to recommend it, then be available to lead it, and you put it all together. So, like, if you want to lead that, Chris, like, by all means, I'll hand over the reins during the whole month of December, and you can have a month of
Christmas
shows.
We already do have a month. It's called Christmas worship.
That's true. She says, of course.
But if we need another extravaganza,
right,
like a Friday night before Christmas extravaganza concert.
Yeah.
I can get on board with that, I think.
Yeah. I put together an extravaganza one time.
Yeah.
It was for the Mix, which was Meet, Interact, Explore. Remember the Mix?
Yeah. I didn't know it stood for anything.
That's what it stands for. See, meet, interact, and then the explore. Right.
That was so cool.
That was super edgy because we were worship with an edge. Right.
With an edge. Yeah.
Of course, we're talking about our old church. But anyway, I had an event called the Cowboy Olympics Extravaganza, and it was super fun. Think like American Gladiators. Remember when it was all of those same contests, but out on a farm with hay bales and a trailer and with these paintball guns and whatnot. And so, like the main event at the end, if you made it there, was kind of like that same idea that you had to make it from point to point without being shot by a paint gun. Okay. It was fun. We had grill out and have some drinks. And
so now, in order to be the one shooting people, did you also have to be the one running?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because you couldn't just, I just want to sign up to shoot.
No.
Like, you got to be on the other end of it too.
Yeah. Okay. So that was fun. But anyway, we had a question from last week. We have 6 minutes. And it was addressed to me specifically.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to get into it?
Well, we've got 6 minutes, so
we can start talking.
We can do whatever we want, I guess.
I think this just came in today, actually. So we're on top of things.
Wow, look at this! How current we are.
This is a question more for Steve Wells. Do you think marijuana is a gateway drug? Do you think people try it and then start escalating to try ever worse and stronger things that lead to cocaine or fentanyl? What would be your advice to young adults regarding trying some of these things?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, let me just say that I'm super honored that you called me out by first and last name.
Right.
And that you specifically asked this towards me. Now,
well, they couldn't say it's for the bald one because
it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
So this is cool. I'm not sure how I should take this, but I'll take it as hey, they're just
Assuming they were listening last week.
because we talked about the Jesus Revolution.
Yeah.
And
there was a lot of
feedback from that of people saying, well, there was a lot of drug references and people, doing drugs and LSD. And it was like, well, you kind of had to show that to show what was happening during that time. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that the purpose of the movie was to advocate for the use of LSD.
Yeah.
I don't think that was the purpose.
Wasn't sponsored by.
So we'll have that disclaimer there. But if you haven't seen that movie, go see it. I heard today that they had done over 55 million at the box office. So it went
That's
way
more
beyond
the new Shazam movie.
Great.
So, there you go.
Yeah. So hopefully
they did like 30 maybe.
Literally is a Jesus revolution out of this, So if there's anything that we need right now, that would be it.
Absolutely.
But anyway, as far as whether or not, so can you read that again?
So asking if it's a gateway drug. So do you think
marijuana,
if people try marijuana, that it leads to other things? And what would you say to more young adults who are thinking about trying some of those things?
Because here in the state of Illinois, it is legal, but it's 18, right? Is it 18 and over? Or what is the legal age?
It's 21, 25 maybe. I think 21. I think it's the same as alcohol.
I don't know what it is, but I guess. What if we put in there, instead of marijuana, what about alcohol? Because I think that, from my own, obviously last week I said that I have done pretty much all of that stuff. And so I guess my one thought is that I've done some pretty stupid stuff in my life, and whether that's being on drugs or not, being completely sober, I've done stupid stuff.
Yeah.
But I've probably done just as stupid stuff as when I was intoxicated with alcohol that I've done with marijuana. So I don't know that one is better than the other necessarily, in my opinion. Everybody's going to have their own thought process on this. I do hear, the whole gateway to other, more dangerous drugs and whatnot. I don't know that it's the drug itself. I don't know that by choosing to smoke marijuana, that it's leading you to something different. I think that has to do with the individual themselves.
Yeah. If they have a more addictive personality, if they are doing it to escape something.
Yeah. What are they going on? What's going on in their life?
You do need more and more and more, maybe.
Yeah. And there is, I guess, for me, it was a curiosity more so than a need, and not only that, but this was in when I don't know when I first started for sure, because I probably can't remember it.
It's been a while.
But it's been a while. And so drugs were definitely different 30 years ago than they are today, even. So, a lot of the stuff that was happening then probably wasn't as potent as it is today. So do I recommend getting into any of it? Absolutely not. No. So am I going to tell hey, teen, go out and try it and experiment and see if you can be enlightened and become closer to God? No, I don't think that's what you need. And I don't think that's really what God wants. But I think with anything, whether it be alcohol, or since marijuana is legal in the state of Illinois, or fast food, or you name it, everything in moderation, right? You can take anything to an extreme point to where it's overindulgence, to where it's not healthy, to where it's not God pleasing.
Yeah.
Do I think God has a problem with alcohol? I don't think so. Do I think that he's got a problem with marijuana? I don't think so. I don't know, because I'm not God. Does he have a problem with eating way too much and not treating your body like a temple? Well, yeah, probably, so you could, with any of these things, it could be that way. So
yeah, it's more the taking it to that extreme, when it becomes an idolization, almost, when it becomes something that's hindering you from other positive areas in your life. Like any quote good or quote bad thing can become that in your life that does start to take over.
Yeah. I think too, can there be some benefits to, let's say, for instance, there's this medical marijuana, right? Well, what does that do if people want to do that versus taking something from a pharmaceutical company that maybe they trust, maybe they don't trust, maybe there's other issues involved, maybe it has horrible reactions with their bodies, and maybe marijuana is something that helps them get through it and deal with some certain things physically. I honestly, I don't have a problem with that. But that's me again. Some people would have a problem with that, but It's just me.
Anything that's mind altering or changing your makeup and your normal state of being.
Yeah.
I think it's something that should be treated wisely.
Right. And when I was doing drugs, I guess at the time, I wasn't doing it for any medical reasons. So it was just no. It was not knowing what it could do. I mean, as a teenager in mid-20s and whatnot, it's not like your brain is fully even developed at that point anyway. So it's like you're gonna do just dumb stuff.
Yeah.
So
I think the age, the accessibility is getting to younger and younger ages, which is scary and is dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially because not only is it a younger age, but it's higher potency.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's dangerous.
Yeah.
So I don't recommend it.
Absolutely. Well, that is our time. I'm gonna let you wrap it up. So
1:31, and so thanks for being with us today. Hopefully, things that you got something out of it today. I don't know if you did or not.
No, it was a little enjoyable.
If anything, it was a conversation that was very one-sided between Andrew and I, and not you. So, which is like kind of how we like to do our conversations. So no, with that, thanks for tuning in. This has been Questions You Never Thought You Could Ask in Church with Pastor David Gaddini, Andrew Metcalf, Steve Wells for the most part. And Dave, we are going to continue to pray for you for healing. And until next week, we'll see you then.